It was New Year's Eve, and my little sister was begging me to play hide and seek. The second I covered my eyes and started counting to 30, that eraser in my brain started moving again. It's a strange, smooth sensation, the feeling of a chalkboard being wiped clean, while the chalk is still writing. Then I simply turned around, walked back into the house, and started watching the New Year's countdown on television. An hour later, my mother was kneeling in front of me, hands gripping my shoulders. "Elena, where's your sister?" "Sister?" I blinked, the flickering light of the television reflecting in my eyes. "I don't have a sister." The look on my mother's face shifted instantly. It wasn't just worry. It was a flash of pure, unadulterated horror. Nobody stayed for the New Year's dinner. They abandoned the roast and the wine, charging out into the driving blizzard. But no matter how loud they screamed her name, Sophie didn't appear. My mother's hand flew up, catching me across the face with a sickening crack. Eyes were rimmed with a violent red. "Did I not tell you to watch her? Did I not tell you to stay by her side every single second? Where is she, Elena? Which way did she go? Answer me." She shoved me and I tumbled backward, sinking into the freezing slush outside the porch. "Why couldn't it have been you?" she wailed, her voice breaking over the wind. "Why couldn't the idiot be the one who got lost? You don't remember anything anyway. You forgot your sister today. What's next, me or father? Are we just going to disappear from your head, too?" She lunged at me again, but my father caught her, pulling her back. They were both sobbing now, their grief a physical weight in the air. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. She was right. Why couldn't it have been me? My father held my mother's wrist tight, stopping her hand just inches from my cheek enough. His voice was a jagged rasp. "She's sick, Diane. You know she's sick. Because she's sick is exactly why I told her not to leave the house." My mother wrenched her hand free, though she didn't come near me again. She just stood there staring at me with those bloodshot eyes. "She's only 4. It's freezing out there. Where could she go, 4? I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Was the sister 4 years old? My mind was a blank slate, beyond the muffled sounds of the television, and the swirling white flakes falling from the sky. There was nothing. No memories of a little girl. No echoes of laughter. The neighbors started arriving, drawn by the commotion. I stood there alone, the crowd shouts fading as they called out for Sunny. "Sunny, isn't that my name?" A fragment of a memory flickered. I was 3 years old, and my parents were calling me Sunny. "Elena, what are you doing?" "Just standing there." "Get moving and help find your sister, Elena." When did my name change again? I couldn't wrap my head around it, so I stopped trying. As I stood up, a cry erupted from the distance. "Found her. She's here." Everyone rushed toward the old oak tree at the edge of the property. There was a shallow depression there, a hollow in the earth now partially filled with snow. Sophie was inside it. Her face was a terrifying shade of blue, purple, her golden hair matted with icicles. My mother let out a harrowing scream and threw herself into the pit. "Sunny, my baby." As if sensing the heat, Sophie's eyes fluttered open, but she didn't look at our mother. She looked straight at me. "Lainey, why didn't you come find me?" She began to cry. Weak, thin sound. "You promised you'd count to 30 and find me." I hid so well. "I was waiting for you." My mother's head snapped toward me. She placed Sophie down gently and walked toward me with a terrifying, slow gate slap. The blow landed this time. My left ear rang instantly, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the wind. "Are you happy now?" My mother's voice trembled with a lethal rage. "You satisfied seeing her nearly freeze to death? This disease, this goddamn disease. You forget your sister. You forget us. I bet you're just waiting for the day you can forget yourself." The tears finally spilled over her cheeks. "Or maybe you're faking it. Maybe you did this on purpose, pretending to forget just so she'd die out here alone in the cold. That's enough." My father finally spoke, but he didn't look at me. He was busy wrapping Sophie in his coat. "Get her inside. Get her warm. The paramedics are on their way." No one said a word. In my defense, I didn't know how to argue anyway. It was my fault. My mother gave me one last look of pure loathing. "You stay out here. Stay right here and feel exactly how cold and scared your sister was." The snow began to fall harder, heavy and silent. I slowly crouched down, mimicking Sophie's posture, and curled myself into that same shallow pit. The biting cold soaked through my clothes instantly. "So, this is what it felt like." I was a horrible person. How could I have forgotten something so important? I didn't know why there was an eraser in my head. I only knew that things I remembered in the morning became blurry. By noon, this sky grew darker in the distance. The lights of the town twinkled one by one, and I heard the faint pop of early fireworks. I should go home. I tried to move my stiff legs. As I stood up, a familiar dizzying sensation washed over me again. I blinked, looking around. The trees were white, The road was white. I turned in a circle. What? What was I supposed to be doing home, right? Go home. But where was home? My heart started thumping against my ribs. I pressed my hand to my chest, gasping for air. Think today is New Year's Eve. Sophie wanted to play hide and seek. Mom hit me, and then what? I couldn't remember. It's okay. I'll just wait. They'll realize I haven't come back. They'll come looking for me, just like they looked for Sophie. I hugged my knees in the pit, counting the distant firecrackers. 1, 2. By the time I got to 17, I forgot what came before. I waited until the midnight bells chimed. Fireworks exploded in the sky, lighting up the world in bursts of neon green and crimson. I curled up tighter. Strangely, the cold began to fade. I started feeling hot, unbearably hot. I pulled off my sweater, but the heat was still there, pulsing under my skin. By the time I was down to my thin thermal undershirt, I felt light, weightless, like I was floating. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was back in the house. The television was still on. My mom was on the sofa cradling Sophie, feeding her ginger tea with a small spoon. Drink up, Sonny. Just a little more. It'll get the chill out of your bones. Sophie's cheeks were rosy again. She was wrapped in a thick wool blanket, her eyes peeking out. Where's Lainey? Sophie asked. Suddenly, my mother's hand stiffened. Don't talk about her. But she's not back yet. She deserves it. She needs to know what it feels like to freeze. She's nearly an adult, and she can't even look after a child. I wanted to walk over and say I was sorry, but as I moved, I drifted right through the coffee table. I froze. Elena isn't back, my father said, standing by the window, staring into the white abyss. The storm is getting worse. Oh, now you're worried? My mother didn't even look up. What if something had really happened to Sonny tonight? What then? My father was silent. Sophie whimpered, shrinking into her mother's arms. Diane immediately softened her tone, patting the girl's back. It's okay, baby. Mommy isn't mad at you, my sweet Sonny. My father stood there for a long time, before finally turning away from the window. When she gets back, I need to have a talk with her. My father sat up all night, but I never walked through the door. When my mother came out of the bedroom the next morning, her face was gaunt. Is that brat still not back? My father sat at the kitchen table, an ashtray full of cigarette butts in front of him. I went to the neighbors this morning. No one's seen her. She's probably hiding in some corner trying to make us feel guilty. My mother slammed a pile of dirty laundry onto the floor. That's her favorite trick. Screw up, then play dumb, and act like a victim. So we'll go easy on her. Well, not this time. Not after what she did to Sonny. When she shows her face, I'm going to make sure she never forgets this lesson. Sophie was sitting on a small stool playing with blocks. She looked up. Mommy, don't hit Lainey, sweetie, my mother said, her voice instantly turning to honey. Lainey was very bad. She almost let you freeze. When people do bad things, they have to be punished. Do you understand? Sophie nodded vaguely and went back to her blocks. Father sighed, crushing out his cigarette. This town isn't that big. Where could she go? She probably spent the night at a friend's because she felt slighted. Before he could finish, a neighbor's voice boomed from the yard. Hey, Rob. Time to head to the old oak for the New Year's bonfire. My father stood up. They locked the door and led Sophie toward the edge of the woods. Elena is still not back, neighbor asked as they joined the group. She's spoiled rotten, my mother replied instantly. I scolded her yesterday, and she ran off to sulk. 17 years old, and not a lick of sense. Well, the girl is sick, Diane. Maybe have some patience. My mother's eyes scanned the faces, her expression growing darker with every passing second. She's not here. Maybe she's hiding. My father muttered. We'll search house to house after the ceremony. I can't have vanished into thin air. I looked at them. Mom, Dad, I'm right here. I'm in the pit behind the tree. The ceremony began. The town elder said a few words of blessing, and people stepped forward to light candles. My mother bowed her head, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. When the town prepared to light the traditional New Year's firecrackers in the clearing, my mother suddenly shouted, "Wait." Everyone turned to her. My daughter isn't here yet, she said, her voice sounding thin. The whole family needs to be here for the blessing. I squinted. Maybe she did still care. Just a little. He's probably watching from the bushes. Someone said, let's light it. We can't miss the auspicious hour. But Mommy. Sophie tugged on her mother's coat, pointing her small hand toward the shallow pit, partially hidden by the snow. Was she there yesterday? My mother followed her finger. There was something at the bottom of the pit. My father saw it too. He frowned and walked over, brushing away a layer of fresh powder. It was my sweater and my coat. They were frozen solid, stiff as boards. My father's hand stopped midair. My mother walked up behind him. She stared at the pile of clothes for a long time, then looked around at the vast, empty, white field. Sophie squeezed the button eye in her hand and whispered, "If Lainey took off her clothes, isn't she cold?" My father picked up the sweater.
He didn't move me.
Mother snatched the sweater from him and shook it. Ice crystals fell like salt. She thinks if she leaves these here, we'll get scared. We'll come crawling to find her.
Dream on.
If she freezes, it's her own fault. She's so incredibly selfish. My father's face went pale. Sophie let go of her mother's hand and ran to the edge of the pit. She started digging with her small hands, just like Dad had. Suddenly, she pulled something small out of the snow.
It was my hair tie.
Sophie held the hair tie and the button eye together in her tiny, freezing hand. She looked up at her parents. "These are Lonnie's." My mother grabbed the hair tie, her knuckles turning white. The neighbors sensed the shift in the air and began to gather around. But I saw it. Her hand was shaking. My father didn't say anything. He began to circle the tree searching. The neighbors joined in. Their festive mood evaporated. Sophie, still held in her mother's grip, looked up and asked quietly, "Is Lainey hiding like I was yesterday? Is she in the pit?" My mother froze. She looked down into the hollow. "Elena, stop scaring me. If I find out you're lying, I swear I'll kill you." Even as she said the words, she let go of Sophie and knelt by the pit. She began to claw at the snow. "If you're playing a joke on us, I'm done. I'll forget you entirely." All her words cut off as a flash of pink thermal fabric appeared. And then she saw my face. She didn't scream right away. She just stared at my face. My eyes were half open, clouded over with a milky frost, staring blankly up at the gray morning sky. My lips were cracked and pulled back in a grimace, tinged with a terrifying, bruised violet. I looked like a discarded porcelain doll that had been left out to weather and ruin. "Elena," she whispered. The cruelty, the venom, the absolute certainty of her anger, it was all gone. It had been replaced by the high, thin voice of a terrified child. "Elena, stop.
Stop it.
Open your eyes. Stop doing this." She reached down, her bare fingers brushing against my cheek. When flesh meets something that is truly frozen, it doesn't feel like touching ice. It feels like touching stone. The moment her skin made contact with my cheek, the horrific, undeniable reality of that density snapped her mind in half. The scream that tore from my mother's throat didn't sound human. It was a jagged, wet sound that ripped through the winter air, echoing off the bare trunks of the old oak trees. It was the sound of a soul being physically torn from a body. She threw herself into the shallow pit, wrapping her arms around my stiff, unyielding torso. She tried to pull me up, to cradle me against her chest, but my body wouldn't bend. I was locked in that curled, defensive posture, my knees pulled to my chest, my arms wrapped around my shins.
Rob,
help me," she shrieked, her voice cracking, her face pressed against my frozen hair, smearing her hot tears over the icicles clinging to my scalp.
she's so cold, Rob.
"Get her up. We have to get her inside." My father stumbled forward. He looked like a man who had just been shot in the stomach. His face was entirely devoid of blood. He dropped to his knees at the edge of the pit, his trembling hands reaching out, but he didn't touch me. He couldn't. He just stared at my blue, frostbitten fingers. "Oh, God," he wheezed, the air rushing out of him. "Oh God, my little girl. My little girl." "Don't just look at her," my mother wailed, pulling violently at my shoulders. There was a sickening crack as my frozen joints resisted the movement. The sound made my father violently flinch, and my mother let out a hyperventilating sob, recoiling as if she had been burned. I stood a few feet away, drifting just above the trampled snow. I looked at the scene with a strange, hollow detachment. So I am dead, I thought. The eraser in my head hadn't stopped. It was still moving, but the chalkboard wasn't just being wiped clean anymore. The chalkboard had shattered. I felt no pain. The biting cold that had tortured me the night before was completely gone, replaced by a dull, buzzing warmth. I looked at my mother, watching her tear her fingernails to the quick as she dug furiously around my frozen legs, desperately trying to unearth me from the tomb she had ordered me to stay in. I didn't mean it. She kept sobbing, her face buried in my frozen chest, her tears instantly freezing against my thermal shirt. "I didn't mean it, Lainey. I was just angry. I just wanted you to learn. Wake up. Please, 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 Mommy's sorry. Mommy's so sorry." Sophie stood a few yards back, clutching the neighbor's pant leg. Her wide, innocent eyes darted from my frozen body to our screaming mother. "Is Lainey sleeping?" she asked loudly over the howling wind. "Mommy, why is Lainey blue?" A woman in a thick green parka covered Sophie's eyes and turned her away, sobbing into her scarf. The neighbors were scrambling now. Someone was shouting into a cell phone, begging for an ambulance, a police car, anyone. Men were taking off their coats, trying to drape them over my rigid body, as if wool could reverse death. "Diane, let her go," my father choked out, tears finally streaming down his weathered face. He reached into the pit, grabbing my mother by the waist. "Diane, stop. Stop, she's gone." "She's not gone. She's just cold. Get the blankets." My mother fought him like a feral cat, elbowing him in the ribs, screaming, spitting, her eyes wild and utterly broken. "You told me she was faking it. You told me she was just hiding. This is your fault, Rob. It's your fault." "I never said that," my father roared, his grief suddenly morphing into a desperate, defensive rage. He hauled her out of the pit by force, both of them collapsing into the snow. "You told her to stay out here. You told her to feel what Sophie felt." My mother stopped fighting. The words hit her like a physical blow to the head. She lay in the snow, staring at my frozen corpse, her mouth opening and closing silently. The horror of her own command, the realization that I had obeyed her to the very end because my sick, broken brain didn't know what else to do, washed over her. She curled into a ball in the snow, screaming a sound so agonizing that several neighbors had to look away, covering their ears. I drifted closer, crouching down beside her. I reached out, pressing my ghostly hand to her shaking shoulder. I wanted to tell her that it was okay, that the cold had eventually felt warm, that the eraser had made me forget the fear by the time the fireworks started. But my hand passed right through her. The ambulance didn't use its sirens when it took me away. There was no rush. The house became a mausoleum. For the first 3 days, the silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the television playing cartoons for Sophie and the sharp, sudden sound of a glass breaking or a fist hitting a wall in my parents' bedroom. I stayed in the house. I found that I couldn't leave. If I walked out the front door, the world dissolved into a swirling white fog, and within seconds, I would find myself back in the living room, staring at the empty sofa. My father stopped going to work. He sat at the kitchen table, an island of cigarette ash accumulating around him. He didn't shave. He barely spoke. He just stared at the empty space where I used to sit, nursing a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My mother was a ghost, more so than I was. She had brought my clothes back from the police station, the frozen sweater and the coat she had mocked just days prior. They had thawed now, damp and smelling of damp earth and stale frost. She didn't wash them. She carried them around the house, clutching them to her chest. On the 4th night, I watched her walk into my bedroom. It was the first time she had crossed the threshold since New Year's Eve. The room was exactly as I had left it. My bed was unmade. A half-eaten granola bar sat on the nightstand. And there, sitting squarely on my desk, was my corkboard. I followed her inside, standing in the corner as she approached the desk. Her eyes were sunken, rimmed in permanent red, her skin sallow and sickly. She looked at the corkboard. It was covered in yellow post-it notes. When you have an eraser in your head, you have to write things down before they vanish. I had started doing it 6 months ago, when the doctors started using words like early onset neurological decay and unprecedented cognitive atrophy. My mother reached out, her trembling hand brushing the edge of a bright pink sticky note. "Sophie is 4. She likes ginger tea. Do not forget this." Her breath hitched. She moved her finger to the next one. "Mom's favorite color is blue. Buy her blue flowers for her birthday. March 12th. Dad takes his coffee black. No sugar. My name is Elena. Sunny is Sophie's nickname. They call me Lainey." And then, right in the center of the board, a larger piece of lined notebook paper, pinned with 4 thumbtacks. It was dated December 30th, the day before New Year's Eve. My head feels so empty today. I'm scared. Mom yelled at me because I left the stove on. I didn't mean to. I just forgot. I look at her, and sometimes I don't know who she is, and it terrifies me. I don't want to forget them. I love them so much. I'm trying so hard. Please God, let me hold on to them. If I forget them, who am I? Mom thinks I'm lazy. I wish I was lazy. I wish I wasn't disappearing. My mother read the note. She read it again, and then she fell to her knees. She didn't scream this time. The grief had moved past the vocal cords. It was a silent, suffocating thing. She pulled the notebook paper from the corkboard, crushing it against her chest, and pressed her face into my unmade bed. She wept until she vomited, retching into the trash can by my desk, and then lay on the floor, shivering, curled up in the exact same posture they had found me in under the oak tree. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry, my baby. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know." I sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at her. The anger I might have felt in life had been wiped away by the eraser. Now there was only a profound, heavy sorrow. I wanted to stroke her hair. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't in the cold anymore.
But the rules of the dead are strict.
We are condemned to watch the living tear themselves apart with the guilt we leave behind. The funeral was a closed casket. They said the frostbite and the pooling of blood had made my face unsuitable for viewing. The whole town attended. The same people who had stood by the oak tree with candles now stood in the church, dressed in black, their eyes darting nervously toward my parents in the front row. My father stood like a statue, holding Sophie's hand. Sophie was wearing a black dress she didn't like. She kept pulling at the lace collar. "Daddy," she whispered loudly during the pastor's eulogy. "Is Lainey in that box?" My father closed his eyes, a tear escaping down his cheek. He nodded slowly. "Why is she in the box?"
Sophie asked.
"Can she breathe in there?" "Hush, Sonny," my father choked out, pulling her against his leg. My mother sat on the other side. She looked 20 years older. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limp and lifeless around her hollow face. She didn't look at the casket. She stared at the stained glass window above the altar, her eyes completely devoid of light. When it was time to lower the casket into the frozen ground, my mother broke away from the procession. She lunged toward the grave, throwing herself onto the polished mahogany lid before they could lower it. "You can't put her in the cold," she screamed, her nails scratching desperately at the wood. "Not in the cold. She hates the cold.
"Please.
Put her in the sun. She needs to be warm." It took my father and 2 pallbearers to pry her off. She thrashed and wailed, her cries echoing through the quiet cemetery, haunting every person who had ever whispered that I was just a spoiled teenager. I stood by the headstone, reading my own name carved into the granite. Elena Lainey Hayes. Beloved daughter and sister. Beloved. It's funny how death instantly makes you beloved. Life is conditional. Death is an absolute. Winter dragged on, unforgiving and brutal. The snow outside the house piled higher, burying the fences, burying the mailbox, burying the old oak tree in the backyard. As the weeks turned into months, the dynamic of the house rotted from the inside out. My father tried to hold it together for Sophie. He cooked meals, he played with the blocks, he read bedtime stories. But at night, when the house was asleep, I would find him sitting in the garage with a bottle of whiskey, staring at my old bicycle. He would sit there until he passed out in the freezing draft, punishing himself in his own quiet way. But my mother was descending into madness. She stopped leaving the house. She stopped looking at Sophie. Every time Sophie walked into the room, Diane would flinch, looking away as if the sight of her youngest daughter physically burned her. One evening in late February, Sophie walked up to her mother in the kitchen. Diane was staring blankly out the window at the snowdrifts. "Mommy," Sophie said softly, holding up a drawing. "I drew Lainey." Diane turned slowly. She looked at the crude crayon drawing, a stick figure with yellow hair, wearing a pink shirt, standing next to a smaller stick figure. "Get that away from me," Diane whispered, her voice trembling. "But I made it for you," Sophie said, her lower lip quivering. "Because you cry all the time. I thought Lainey would make you happy. I said get it away." Diane suddenly shrieked, swatting the paper out of Sophie's hand. Sophie burst into tears, backing away in terror. My father rushed into the kitchen, scooping Sophie up in his arms and glaring at my mother. "What the hell is wrong with you, Diane?" he roared. "She's 4 years old. She's trying to comfort you. I don't want her comfort." Diane screamed back, grabbing a porcelain plate from the counter and hurling it at the wall. It shattered into 100 pieces. Every time I look at her, I remember. If it weren't for her, Elena would still be here. If she hadn't run out into the snow, Elena wouldn't be dead. Silence crashed down on the kitchen. My father stood frozen, holding a weeping Sophie. His face hardened, the last vestiges of his sympathy dying in his eyes. "You don't get to do that," he said, his voice dangerously low, practically vibrating with venom. "You do not get to blame a 4-year-old child for what you did." Sophie hid because she was playing a game. Elena forgot her because she had a disease that was rotting her brain. He stepped closer, pointing a trembling finger at my mother's face. "But you sent a sick child into a blizzard. You told her to freeze. You beat her, and you banished her, and you left her there to die. So, don't you dare put this on Sonny. You killed Elena. You alone." Diane recoiled, as if she had been stabbed. She backed into the counter, sliding down to the linoleum floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She covered her ears, weeping, shaking her head side to side. "I know," she sobbed into her knees. "God, I know. I know." My father didn't comfort her. He just turned his back, carried Sophie up the stairs, and locked the bedroom door. I floated in the center of the kitchen, looking at the broken pieces of the porcelain plate. The eraser in my head suddenly sparked. I remembered this plate. I remembered dropping one just like it when I was 12, and my mother hugging me, telling me it was okay, that it was just a plate. Where had that mother gone? When did the disease in my brain infect her heart? I drifted down to the floor, sitting next to her. I laid my transparent head on her shoulder. "It's okay," I whispered into the empty air, knowing she couldn't hear me. "The eraser took my memory, Mom. Let it take your pain. Please." The climax of our tragedy arrived on the anniversary of my diagnosis, early March. The weather had been deceptively mild for a few days, but the radio had warned of a sudden, brutal squall moving in from the north. A freak spring blizzard, the meteorologist called it. By midnight, the temperature plummeted to 10 degrees below zero. The wind howled against the windows like a chorus of starving wolves, rattling the glass and shaking the foundation of the house. I was sitting in my bedroom, staring at the corkboard, when I heard the front door click open. I drifted through the floorboards to the entryway. My mother stood by the door. She was wearing only her thin cotton pajamas. No shoes. No coat. No gloves. Her eyes were glazed over, staring straight ahead with a terrifying, vacant resolve. She pulled the door open. The wind immediately blasted into the house, bringing a flurry of violent snow that coated the hardwood floor. She stepped out into the blizzard. Panic, sudden and electric, flared in my ghostly chest.
No.
No, Mom. What are you doing? I flew through the door, chasing after her. She was walking with a rigid, unnatural gait, her bare feet sinking deep into the freezing, slushy snow. The cold must have been agonizing instantly, slicing through her soft skin like razor blades, but she didn't make a sound. She didn't shiver. She was walking straight toward the edge of the property, toward the old oak tree.
Mom.
Stop, I screamed. The wind swallowed my voice. She reached the tree. The depression in the earth was completely filled with fresh powder, but she knew exactly where it was. She dropped to her knees in the snow. Elena, she whispered into the raging wind. Elena, I'm here. I'm ready. She lay down. She curled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around her shins, and pressed her face into the freezing snow, mimicking the exact posture I had died in. I need to know, she muttered, her lips already turning a pale shade of blue. I need to feel it. I need to feel exactly what I did to you. The blizzard roared, dumping snow over her. Within minutes, her hair was white, her thin pajamas soaked through, clinging to her freezing skin. Violent, uncontrollable shivers began to rack her body. Her teeth chattered, so hard I could hear them clicking over the wind. Wake up. I screamed toward the house.
Dad.
Wake up. In the master bedroom, my father shifted in his sleep. The icy draft from the open front door had finally reached the second floor. His eyes snapped open. He felt the empty space in the bed beside him. He vaulted out of bed, running down the stairs. When he saw the open front door and the bare footprints leading into the howling white void, he didn't even grab his coat. He just ran. Back at the oak tree, my mother was entering the second stage of hypothermia. The violent shivering was beginning to slow down, replaced by a sluggish, deadly lethargy. Her eyes were half closed. Lainey, she mumbled, her voice slurred. It hurts so much. I'm sorry. I threw myself over her. I knew I had no physical form, I knew I had no warmth to give, but I pressed my spiritual body against hers, trying to shield her from the wind. I wrapped my ghostly arms around her freezing frame. I forgive you. I screamed directly into her ear, crying tears that didn't exist. I forgive you, Mommy. Get up. Please get up. Sonny needs you. Dad needs you. You can't leave them with the eraser too. Suddenly, my mother's eyes snapped wide open. She looked straight up. She didn't look through me this time.
She looked at me.
For the first time since New Year's Eve, our eyes locked.
She saw me.
I don't know if it was a hallucination born of a dying, oxygen-starved brain, or if the sheer veil of death had worn thin enough in the blizzard for her to cross over.
But she saw me.
She saw my pink thermal. She saw my frostbitten cheeks. She saw the forgiveness in my eyes. Lainey, she whispered, lifting a trembling, blue hand. I reached down and pressed my palm against hers. For one impossible, fleeting second, there was heat. A blinding, searing flash of warmth transferred from my soul into her dying body. Go home, Mom, I whispered, my voice sounding like the chime of a bell over the wind. Go home and remember me. Don't let me disappear. Her hand dropped. A split second later, my father crashed through the brush. Diane, he roared. He fell into the pit, hauling her out of the snow. She was completely limp, her skin ice cold, her lips purple. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her bridal style, and sprinted back toward the house with a strength born of absolute terror.
I didn't follow them this time.
I stood by the old oak tree, watching him carry her through the blinding white storm. The front door slammed shut, cutting off the golden light of the hallway. The wind continued to howl, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel the phantom chill. I looked down at my hands. They were glowing. The bruised, necrotic purple of my frostbite was fading, replaced by a soft, luminous light. I closed my eyes, and something miraculous happened. The eraser stopped. It didn't just pause. It lifted off the chalkboard entirely. And suddenly, the slate was flooded with color. I remembered everything. I remembered the smell of my father's cologne when he taught me how to ride a bike. I remembered the taste of the burnt pancakes my mother made on my 10th birthday, and how we laughed until we cried. I remembered the exact shade of Sophie's golden hair when they brought her home from the hospital, and how tiny her fingers felt wrapped around my thumb. I remembered my name. Elena. Lainey. Sunny's big sister. I wasn't a girl with a rotting brain anymore. I wasn't a victim frozen in a pit. I was just me. Whole. Intact. Perfect. I opened my eyes. The blizzard around me was dissolving, the snow turning into floating motes of golden light, drifting upward into an impossibly vast, starry sky. I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window, I saw the paramedics rushing into the living room. I saw my father holding my mother's hand as they wrapped her in heated blankets. I saw Sophie standing on the stairs, clutching her block, watching. My mother turned her head. She looked out the window, straight toward the oak tree. She was crying, but it wasn't the agonizing wail of the damned anymore. It was the quiet, sacred weeping of someone who had been given a second chance. She mouthed 2 words through the glass. I remember. I smiled. The weight of the world, the heavy, crushing gravity of grief and sickness, fell away from my shoulders. I turned around, stepping out of the shallow pit, and walked into the warm, endless light.